My name is Darcy Lear. I'm a career coach, and I train foreign language students to highlight their linguistic and culture skills in their job search documents, professional school applications, and interview preparation, so they're standout candidates in really competitive job markets. And what I see is that students everywhere intuitively know I will pair language studies with my pre-professional studies, like we've talked about today, with engineering, environmental studies, pre-med, and I know that'll help me in my career. And then these language departments are so proud of their alum with these really successful careers in law and law enforcement, business professions, medical professions, government and diplomacy, education and social services. But what was always missing when I was working in the university system was, how do you get from point A, where you are, successful students, to point B, those successful careers where you're using your language studies? And that's the piece that was sort of consistently missing. But we know that you can use it. It's just someone has to help you develop those materials and bridge that gap. And so the question that you want to answer is, how can majoring in a language help you get the job you really want when you graduate? But to answer that, you have to think from the employer's perspective. And I will go back to this over and over and over the next hour. Stop thinking about you and like talking about you and me and hire me, and start researching the companies, thinking about the employers, asking what they want, reading what their mission statements are. Corporate social responsibility is all over the place now. Does it really stand up with what you're studying, Austin? Maybe, maybe not. They survey employers all the time, and employers over and over and over say, these are the skill sets that we're looking for in new hires. To this, they add things like flexibility, leadership, teamwork, ability to behave in culturally appropriate ways in a variety of situations. Like, that's exactly what we're doing in language courses and language programs and minors and majors. The problem comes when we list these terms, we get the results from what the employers want, and in the university context we say, yep, we're doing a great job, pat ourselves on the back, check, 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 check. Our students communicate verbally and in writing. They do a 10-page paper and an accompanying presentation at midterms, and again at finals. They take the frameworks we use in class to analyze literature. They organize those papers in an introduction, body, and conclusion. We are preparing students for what employers want. The problem is, you get into the working world and it turns out employers don't want an essay with an intro, body, and conclusion, right? They want you to be able to organize an agenda for a meeting using bullet points. They want you to communicate about that meeting in an email that goes out to everyone who has to attend the meeting, and there's no questions asked, no back and forth. When you say Friday, March 17th, do you mean Friday or do you mean March 17th, right? We've all gotten those. Can you communicate clearly so that people know what they have to do when they receive that email? Problem solving and decision making. When you're writing that memo, can you decide for yourself how long it should be, how many words it should be, what font you should use, how big your margins should be, right? Your manager doesn't want you coming back to them and asking them to help you make every little decision and solve every little problem. Here in the university, we're inadvertently encouraging you to do that because your grade will get tanked if you don't have the exact right font and margin sizes, right? So we're not always speaking the same language. But we know in studying languages you are getting these skills, because from the first day of Language 101, you encounter problems, you make split-second decisions to solve them, you reason with yourself, you analyze your own situation. I know what I need to say, I don't know any verbs, I can't conjugate a verb, but I can say meeting, noon, Friday, ALTEC, and communicate. So you've done what they want you to do. You've done it in the first day of Language 101, but you need to know how to use that example, build upon that example to connect it to the real world professional skills, spoon feed the employers both the story and the professional skill that you now have as a result of that story. And this is where we see a problem. Students don't know how to package all of those great skills they're getting in their language studies. And this is why I quit working in the university and started career coaching, because so many students, after minoring or majoring, studying abroad, doing service learning, volunteering in contexts where they were using the languages, planning their own trips and executing them. They'd ask me for a letter of recommendation attached to my resume. At the very bottom, like a PS afterthought, is the skills section, which is not very useful anyway. Microsoft Office, duh, everybody's proficient in that, although if the job ad says that that's required, you should probably have it on your resume. Spanish, C++, these are amazing skills that don't mean anything when you just pop one word down at the bottom. How do you use your Spanish? Illustrate it on your resume. What have you coded using that coding language? Illustrate it on your resume. So for example, Spanish or languages are what I'm talking about. This student did a pretty good job. She has this section on her resume, which when you're a student and you don't have a whole page worth of just education and work experience, you need categories like community service and leadership, volunteerism and causes, professional experience where you're in professional contexts but you're not getting paid, so you can't call it work, but you can call it professional experience. So you design these new categories for your resume. You need to have at least 2 items per new category. And we see this student put the organization where she was volunteering, this one word, field. She gave herself this title. Field volunteer, that one word field tells us she didn't sit in her dorm room and work on the computer for this department. She didn't go to this Orange County department and sit on their computer and do data entry or stuff envelopes at the desk. She was out in the community, outside of the campus bubble, and employers want to know that. They want to know that your whole world hasn't just been this campus, right? What did she do? Here I see how she used her Spanish. And I know as an educator that she's probably an intermediate speaker because the actual survey is basically a script. But to get people to do the survey, you have to walk up to strangers on the street, engage them in conversation in their native language, your second language, and you have to get them to agree to do the survey. So you need intermediate language skills, but you need really good interpersonal skills. She could have made this better, and that is by adding quantifiable information. And I'll say it again in a few minutes. Go through your resume and add quantifiable information everywhere you can. In this case, how many surveys, over what period of time, what was the return rate, those 3 characters, if she had said 75% for her return rate. That shows us that 3 out of 4 people she randomly approached on the street agreed to do this survey. That's amazing interpersonal communication skills. 1 out of 4 said what? No. What does that show us about her that employers want? She's what? Approachable. She's approachable because she got a high return rate, but when someone says no to her, she's not devastated by that. She's resilient in the face of failure. And what's a really common interview question? What are your weaknesses? I told you about that. Tell me about a time you failed at something and what you did. You need these little stories to say. Well, only 3 out of 4 people said yes. The other 1 out of 4 I had to deal with. So here's some examples with, hi, welcome.
I'm so sorry.
No.
Traffic was unexpectedly heavy.
No problem. There's a sign-in sheet over there by Lauren.
Okay, this is for the language maybe?
Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
Thank you. So we see the time periods, the pamphlets, the local agencies. What I love about this is when students do projects for the community, often as part of a course, like a service learning course. Often the semester comes to the end, they give a Word draft of this pamphlet to the local social service agency, which is already stretched too thin to believe, and then they're out of there. They come back to campus, they get their grade, never think about it again. And then that poor, stretched thin, low resource agency has to edit that Word document, then design it in a pamphlet form, get the graphic design done, send it to the printer, get the pamphlets back, and distribute them to the agencies. I see this and I know that student can finish a project and understands the real world context. Now, on both of these things, I will say, don't leave it to the employer to interpret everything I've said here about your intermediate level and your resilience in the face of failure and your success rate and your interpersonal skills. You have to spell that out. Same here. You have to say, unlike my peers, I understand what it is to carry a project all the way to the end in the real world, in a professional workplace. And you say those things in your cover letters, in your personal statements, in your interviews. This comes straight from a course. So even if you're not out in the community, what do we see here that we know employers want right at the beginning? Teamwork. Do you work better in a team or independently? Really common interview question. The right answer is both, right? So we see as part of a team, my individual contribution was this. So I work well both as part of a team and independently. I did a written report and a verbal presentation, right? There's written and verbal communication skills. And the topic was on something outside of that campus bubble. She's aware of the situation of her peer group in another part of the world. Okay? Then I have more examples. I really want to share them with you, Sarah. Really good medical school, really good social service agency examples that are long, and we would run out of time if I spent time doing that. This is a tourist one, and I mentioned it earlier. This shows, again, that you're resourceful, that you can find information, that when there's an outage or a traffic jam, you can figure out how to get somewhere. You might not put this in your resume, but you might use it in a cover letter. You might use it in an interview question to basically say, you can send me on business trips. I won't be making international calls to ask you, how do I get to the meeting when the red line is down? You know how to figure those things out. And employers want young new hires who are independent and resourceful in exactly this way. They know you don't have 3 to 5 years experience like a lot of the ads say, but they don't want to have to hold your hand. And these kinds of seemingly trivial examples, when you fill them in, fill them out completely, are great. The other problem I see with young job candidates like you guys is the job ad will list a specific requirements, such as this. And what you tend to do is parrot this back. Dear sirs, I am passionate about work with international college students. Or you'll have a really good example of how you're passionate about work with college students. But so you tell the really good example, but you forget to say that that example illustrates that you're passionate about work, right? You have to do both. And the reason you have to parrot back is because in every medium and large size company now, robots read your resume. And the robots are just scanning for keywords. So whatever keywords were in the job ad, such as this, if you don't put them in your resume and cover letter because you think, well, the human will know that this is an example of my passion for working with international college students, well, the human won't get it. The human only gets the very best ones that the robot bumps up to human eyes. So you have to have the keywords from every single job ad scattered, sprinkled throughout your cover letter and your resume. And that is why you have to customize those materials for every single job you apply for. I hate when the press gives attention to these frustrated job seekers who are like, I submit 30 resumes a week. No, you submit 30 copies of one resume every week, and that's why nobody's calling you back for interviews. For every one you submit, you have to get those keywords in. So this client came to me, was having trouble getting work, and because she was either parroting this back or telling her experience, and she needed to do both. Here's her real experience that proves that she does have that passion. She tweaked her cover letter and resume and had a job offer a week and a half later. I'll show you where she works. These are some of my different clients and former students. I work a lot with medical students or residents. That's a resident, a Durham resident at the Cleveland Clinic. Now I work with her on her medical school and residency application. That student with a passion for international students works at Intrax. It's on Michigan Avenue in Chicago. Here's another picture. She is a study abroad advisor for students who are here in the US studying abroad and learning English. And as soon as she got her resume and cover letter tweaked for these jobs, she got that job. And that's what we want you to do now, is to start tweaking your job search materials so you'll be the candidate who gets the job and gets called back and knows how to use your really rich experiences and to do that, to be the one who gets the call. So we'll start with page 3. How is your language experience represented on your resume? Because this is where I started down this career path. Students aren't representing their language skills very well on their resumes. Are you? Here you go. So describe your language skills in one word. Go ahead and write that down. You see my example. I said What one word would you use? Okay, give me your one word. So we have fluent, conversational,
I'll say highly proficient. That's two.
highly proficient,
Proficient.
proficient. What else? What are the things that people use even if you didn't use them? What?
Advanced.
Advanced. Intermediate, I was saying about that student. Okay. Now, why though? Like Meredith said, I used highly proficient, but she really wanted to explain more. What were you going to say when you wanted to explain more?
I think in a career world I'd be considered fluent, but on my own personal, I always think I can learn more.
Right, and this is the problem. We under or over value or evaluate ourselves. We aren't objective about our own selves, right? The disclaimer I use as an example here for fluent is, fluent in academic and professional contexts, which is where I've always used Spanish. Plot me down with teenagers anywhere in the Spanish-speaking world, and it could be any language that I've never heard of, right, in those contexts. But the point is you want to be able to say, I have the strategies and the language acquisition skills to learn that if my job is going to be working with Spanish-speaking teenagers. What would you say for conversational? Why conversational?
I've never actually been immersed in the country, so I don't know how well that would go.
So you're conversational in the U.S. context. Reading and writing is harder for you?
Yes.
Yeah, see, the fact that you choose conversational to me implies I can listen okay, I can talk okay, I can't read and write quite as well, right? Why did you choose advanced or proficient? Why?
Because I've taken 100 classes, but I've never been to a country, so I've never had to actually been forced into living.
Right. So all of my experience is academic, right? So I have academic Spanish. Sometimes people use that adjective. What did you use?
So I use proficient, and it's kind of the opposite actually, because I'm much better at conversational. I'm really good at reading and writing, but I'm not so good at academic professional, because it's like a whole different language that they don't teach us.
And what do you mean, like professional, like working in an office somewhere or working in a...
Where I'd be talking to people, if I was in a service position and I was talking to someone else, I'd speak completely different than any other way I've learned, which is we learn conversational.
Right.
So you have to kind of relearn it.
And sometimes this is a frustration on a lot of campuses who don't have the professions programming that you have. I could analyze Quixote with everyone I bump into. They need me to sell soap or whatever the professional job is. And so it's that whole, how do you pitch yourself as a good salesperson in the language when your background is really literary analysis, which is a common problem. So what we see just from this one little activity is, first of all, it's hard to evaluate your own language level and your language skills. And then we always have disclaimers, right? And so that's why it's better to illustrate throughout your resume than just list it as a skill. But if you go to page 4, you'll see, if you're going to use one word adjective plus the language, so advanced Japanese, proficient Spanish, get someone else to evaluate it. So it's an outside objective evaluation. I've given you the link on my website for this chart that you can use, but it's all classroom and you've had, 4 to 7 semesters, you're probably intermediate or high intermediate. There's also this Pearson Higher Ed / Versant. That is an objective, valid, reliable online test that I might not be able to bring up for you guys because this thing is weird here. Can you see it?
This is where it's everything from low, advanced, and then it goes intermediate, and then advanced, low, advanced, medium,
Right.
advanced, high, and superior.
They use these like official ACTFL standards. So you would get, from doing this, you would get a valid, reliable, which means it measures what it says it measures, and it does so consistently. They do Spanish, French, and Arabic. They've been doing this the whole time. And then you get, for intermediate, there's intermediate low, intermediate mid, intermediate high. For advanced, there's low advanced, intermediate advanced, high advanced, or mid advanced. So you can pay them $25 You take this test online, it costs like $100 to do it face-to-face with other organizations, and then you have that on your.
Would you recommend citing this site? I had this done when I finished Peace Corps, and I don't know if it's from this company, but I'm wondering if you have to cite who did the.
I wouldn't take up space on your resume saying that, but in other parts of the interview process, the interview, or maybe if you have a cover letter and a personal statement in there, you know, my language level was independently assessed by ACTFL or your son, right? And one thing I started to see was professional working Spanish on resumes, and I saw that the first time I saw that, I thought, that is great. Well, then I started to see it on every resume that came across my desk, and then it's not great anymore. Like, this is the point. You have to make sure you stand out as the unique you against all the competitions. You can't be saying the same thing they are. So do you all have a good idea of how you would describe your language level in one word, like on the skills section of your resume? Or 2 words, right? You would say what level language, intermediate Spanish, advanced Japanese.
I took a test for German from the Goethe Institute, and I'll get my results back. So could I just use the level that they gave me as far as certification?
That's exactly what you should do. If you have a skills section on your resume, you list it. There's room, comma, Goethe Institute. Right. Okay. But I want to move quickly now to what you should really do, which is illustrate throughout your resume how you use the language, more than just popping it on the end as a skill, right? And this is on page 5 of your resume, and this helps you do a couple things. If you avoid over or undervaluing your own skills, but mostly it shows people how you can use language, right? So I want you to work up a resume line right now, something you can go home and type on your resume. So choose an experience, a course, a study abroad, a service learning project. One thing, just choose one thing, even if you've done everything on that list and more. Then choose the category on your resume where you'll put it. Create a new category if you want. Make sure you're thinking of more than the stereotypical 2 categories, education and work. Because as a student, you probably have to broaden it. So this is for like whole categories, like bold section on the resume. And then down here, you want to say connected with people describing. I would call it like community engagement.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as you have a couple of things, that'd be great.
That's what questions on this.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I would.
I'm sorry to hear about that.
No, happened to me before getting into these workshops and track. Okay, so most people already have a nice bold heading for their resume. I'm sorry, I forgot your name to the Russian student.
David Friedman.
David?
Yeah.
So David's is going to be community engagement because he mostly is proud of how he uses language just when he bumps into people who speak Russian. Community engagement is a great category. The organization where you participated in the activity, if there's an organization, second line. If you're using abbreviations now, like CU, write it out because nobody speaks the internal language of campus. Like here, they were talking to me about 1010 classes. I've never worked on a university campus that uses 4 digits like that. And I think that means like beginning level, right?
Yes, it does.
Right? But you need to say introductory Spanish classes or whatever. So avoid abbreviations, acronyms, code language. Okay, so let me give you another minute since you guys are still working on describing what you did. write out what you did at that place in the workshop. Okay, so let's workshop these. This is just your first draft, first thing out the gate. We're going to turn it into a nice, polished resume line. Sarah, let me use you first. What did you put?
Okay, so I volunteer at the Family Learning Center, and my title I have is mentor. But then my description is mentor Hispanic middle and high school students with homework and studying.
Good. So what do you know what I'm going to start hammering you with just for my little talk? What does she need to add? Quantifiable information. So, how many students? 15 over what period of time?
2 years now.
2 years. And sometimes you would just put in your entry like 2012 to 2014 and then you wouldn't want to repeat it. But over 2 years, mentored 15, what ages?
Middle and high school.
So 15 Hispanic students aged 13 to 18, right? The whole adolescent range. So just adding that quantifiable information helps. Mentored is pretty good, but it's a little vague, and that's the other thing I'm going to tell you. Scratch everything vague. So what did you actually do? Okay. Helped is another word I want you to avoid, right? But tutored, yeah. Or study habit. If part of what you did was help them develop good study habits, right? Tutored. Did you go on field trips? Did you design any lessons? Okay, but you would want to put that. Designed and taught designed and taught 1 weekly lesson over 30 weeks. So you designed 30 courses. That'd be great. Let's use yours next, please, Austin.
I had a study abroad experience in Barcelona, Spain.
Good.
And I just put, I studied in Spanish, lived with a Spanish family, participated in community activities with Spanish friends, and traveled around Spain.
Good, you did a lot. Study abroad, when you go to job fairs, some recruiters will tell you, well, look at your resume where you have that education section that's too big, and they'll say, take study abroad off. It's code for extended spring break party trip with my American friends, right? I don't want you to list it either, because these lists, like the skills list, are bad. I want you to illustrate how you're going to be a good professional employee because of that study abroad, right? So you're off to a good start because you've listed really specific things. But now you have to say, what makes me stand out? Because almost everyone who studied abroad could list those same specific things. So homestays, if you were the only non-Spanish speaking person in that homestay, or did you have an American roommate?
I have not.
Right, most people do now. So if you didn't have an American roommate, you would put that on your resume because that could make you stand out, right? Did you take courses at a Spanish university?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's something that might make you stand out. Took how many? Quantifiable information. How many courses?
3.
Took 3 courses taught in Spanish by Spanish faculty at the University of Barcelona, whatever. And you have to get them. You know, you don't have a lot of room on your resume, so that was probably slightly wordy what I just said, but how many courses? Taught all in Spanish, not by your American professors who went abroad with you, but by, is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes you stand out. Because a lot of people go abroad and take classes in English taught by their American professors because the universities will only give you credit if their faculty taught the courses. Or maybe they taught them in the target language, but it wasn't as authentic of an American. You mentioned other activities. What else? What were those?
I just kind of like did whatever my Spanish friends were doing.
Good, but here's the thing that's important. He said Spanish friends. That makes you stand out.
Yeah.
And so I've helped people put on their resume things like the organization Respiros Yoga and that this guy walked in off the street, signed up for this yoga studio because yoga was his interest. He was with all Spaniards. He was the only American doing yoga there. He made friends with some of the other people, right? So if you take your real interests, maybe you like to knit. Well, you find a local community of knitters while you're studying abroad. You get to know them there, you knit together, and you continue to communicate once you get back home because you're part of each other's social network and you have that knitting bond. Online gaming has become a really good thing that people do, like with friends abroad, and then can continue doing once they get back with those people from abroad. So how did you make these Spanish friends?
I joined a climbing gym. I met him there.
Yeah. So it's exactly like the yoga example.
Yeah.
It wasn't set up by your American university.
No.
We lost the screen up here.
No.
Right, and so that is what you would put on your resume. All this stuff you listed right there, I'm like, yeah, but so with everyone else.
Right.
I put the name of the climbing gym, the fact that you joined and became the only American to hang out with this group of fellow climbers. Then the activities you did with them were probably outdoor climbing related, stuff that everyone in Boulder is like, yeah, of course. And as soon as you step outside of a Boulder, Americans think you're crazy for climbing and doing everything. So that makes you stand out, but you don't think it makes you stand out because in Boulder it just makes you one part of the crowd.
Right.
So lots of great examples there. Give me one more workshop. Yes, please, Meredith.
So title, Spanish Fluency and Professionalism. Top 4 multicultural project management and leadership seminars in Panama in both Spanish and Albania, each lasting 5 days.
To how many students? That quantifiable number is huge. Over 100 students is totally different than tutoring 4 or 5 at a time, or 15. So that quantifiable information you could add. Do you have names of the courses, or what was that?
The seminar was project management leadership. It lasted 5 days, so there were maybe 10 seminars a day. And then
Good. And you designed the course, or that the curriculum was given to you and you just?
I designed only part of it. Some of it was, we had titles and then we had to design the curriculum around it.
So that's great. I would only add the quantifiable information of how many students, because you don't want to leave 3 digits, 100 on a resume. Takes up no space if you're trying to fit it on one page. And it has a huge impact that you somehow can manage public speaking in front of 100 people, manage 100 students.
Do you suggest being at it 4 times? Should I combine all the students together? So like, 300 students or something, or 350, whatever? Or should I just do for one seminar 100 students?
Either way, I might say a total of 300, so that you're suggesting over time it was a total of 300, but not 300 at a time. Emphasizing that a single cohort with 100 has its advantages, though. And again, this is where you might tweak depending on the job ad. Do you need to do public speaking in front of large groups? Then maybe I would emphasize that the single group is 100. And you might, for certain job ads, say designed 4 out of the 12 course. Like program development is huge. I'm seeing program development in job ads, and if you've co-taught a course or volunteered and did design the curricula or volunteered in schools, that's a great one. So do you see where we're going with this? Does anyone else want to work through theirs now? Like I think 3 of you can just type it because it can't be handwritten, and you have a solid resume line that highlights the kind of thing that makes you stand out against the competition in the job market. Do any of the rest of you want to workshop it publicly here?
Can I read mine?
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, I'm still beginning Russian, but
Right.
so I wrote down for box 4 on page 5. That's where we're on, right?
Right.
Okay, so I wrote down I spoke, or well, I still speak Russian and Swedish to varied people that I met in my local community. I mean, because I feel like that's pretty valid to show that you're doing it in the daily life outside of the academic setting.
Right.
But you need to show that in a different way, I think.
So and this is good because the real world language skills make you stand out against the people who can analyze Quixote but can't order a beer. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or say hello with the proper language and cultural side effects at the beginning of a business meeting in Russian, right? So real world Russian and Swedish. What quantifiable information could you add there?
What do you mean by quantifiable?
Numbers. How many people?
How many people?
Over what period of time? How many social engagements?
This was maybe from 2012 to 2014. Well, I'm from Hawaii. I just moved here, so a lot of these people are from where I used to live. So it was about maybe 2 or 3 years. I think I knew like 4 different Swedish people. I knew like 3 or 4 different Russian people in my Honolulu community, and so I would just connect with all of them as best as I could. So
Good. So over a 4-year period, networked with 4 Belgians, 4 Swedish,
yeah.
4 Swedish, and 4 Russian community members, or
Yeah.
something like that. Networked might be a good word to use, but this whole real world Spanish, but quantifiable information is numbers.
Actually, also like in the Honolulu community, they have a Russian community, and so I would always go to their events and also talk to more of those people as well. I don't know, I feel like maybe that's valid in some way, and I need to let them know that I've done these things
Yes.
as best as I can.
That's almost a better resume line. Attended a total of 5 events sponsored by the Russian Community Association of Honolulu over a 4-year period. That gives
Okay.
people a really good idea of.
So
and it-
take it and connect it and make it sound good, is what it sounds like you're trying
Yeah.
to say. Okay.
Make it sound professional.
Uh-huh.
Name the organizations that were sponsoring those events. And then in your cover letter, your personal statement, your interviews, you say, I took the initiative to go to those events, unlike most of my peers who would only do such a thing if there was course credit involved. Or you don't want to talk negatively about anyone, including your peers.
Yeah.
But you want to, where you have more room than on a resume, make sure you're showing how you stand out.
Uh-huh.
Saying, I took the initiative to go to those events on my own time so that I could get to know real people, practice my language skills, which you don't have room to do on a resume. On a resume, you just want these things to pop, like the number of events, the name, the formal name of that organization spelled
Right.
out, the number of people you interacted with.
Mhm.
If that led to anything, did that give you an opportunity to do something else? You could add that.
Okay.
How's yours, Lauren?
But volunteered independently with study abroad students from Japan to foster their language skills, their English language skills using both English and Japanese.
Good. What's the first thing you got to add?
Numbers.
Yes. How many students? Good. Volunteered is a little bit vague, like what you started with. So, did you tutor with them? You tutored, so tutored maybe. Sometimes those are in what we call in Spanish intercambios, or international exchanges, where you develop your Japanese language and culture skills while helping them develop their English language and culture skills. So you could call it an international, implemented an international exchange. Because when you say you did it independently, that means you just went out into the world and figured it out. What do you mean by independently?
That they were friends that wanted to work on their English and I wanted to work on my Japanese.
Right. But you didn't go through the study abroad office or your professor, right? So independent or implemented an international exchange with X number of, right? And that sounds more professional to say implemented international exchange than volunteered independently, especially if the category on your resume is volunteerism. Oh, you're tutoring, right? Tutor Japanese students in what subject?
English was the subject.
And if you can name a specific course they were working on, what do you have on yours, Ray?
I studied for 3 months in Berlin at the Freie University at Berlin, while also traveling to Ireland, the United Kingdom, and the Czech Republic.
Good. Now, it's the same issues we talked about with Austin. That's good. Pretty typical study abroad experience, what makes you stand out over your peers. And just think of that group you studied with and what did you do that no one else did? Did you join a rock
I
climbing
haven't
club?
done it yet. I'm going this summer, so.
So now you have, this is great. If you have the opportunity to build, think about this. How are you going to stand out while you're there? And you know how these realizations always come to you. You're jogging or showering or driving and you're oh, that's the example I'll use and that's how I'll connect it and that's how I'll make it sound professional instead of social or whatever. How about your example?
I'm still working on it. The study abroad. Some of my phrases are intensive cultural immersion travel, advanced analysis, and short deadlines.
Deadlines are good. I don't, advanced analysis, you'd have to give me more
It's
information.
really related more to the academics of it.
And if you were applying to grad school, you would need that. Is that something you would be doing? You are a grad student?
I am a number of things right now.
Were you here when I was telling you
I
about
teach,
the metro?
and I'm finishing up a Spanish major, which I never did, but I've been teaching Spanish for a while. I may do a graduate program, I don't know.
So you have tons you can put on there, the teaching. This short deadlines thing, that would be a good thing to develop for a resume, because students are notoriously like last minute, pulling all-nighters, things that you can't do if you're working on a long-term project, or you're used to every single thing fitting into 15 weeks, right? There's never a project that goes beyond 15 weeks, so if it's kind of half-assed, at the end of 15 weeks you hand it in anyway, and then you never think about it again. Whereas in the professional world, those deadlines and those projects go beyond that, and you have to keep working on them. They might be year-long, and you have to know how to break them down. So showing that you have that skill to deal with real-world deadlines is a great thing to develop.
So you're saying the short deadlines isn't necessarily something that takes you out of the academic typical?
I think it does take you out of the academic typical if you spin it as this professional skill that, right, so you can produce high quality on a short deadline, or you can, if you've written a dissertation or done a project like that where it's huge years long, but you know how to break it down into 10 doable chunks, and for each chunk make a 100-item task list, you would articulate that. That's something you could really do. So if you go on the last page, on page 6, I have a box for you to refine what you just did. What we refined them, but you might not have been writing it down.
So I just have a question. So like the sign up front, it's going on in motion and obviously with the LGBT related issues. So is that what you mentioned that while talking to people, I talked about like real actual issues,
Yeah.
and it wasn't just, friendship conversations.
Right, so he's talking about talking about real world issues when he's interacting with people using these target languages. It's important to show your sort of outside of the academic bubble, the student bubble. The specific issues that you would want to mention depend on the job you're applying for. And you want to play it up if that's something you know they're looking for, and play it down if it's not.
Uh-huh.
So that's
What do you mean by play it down? What does that mean?
Like you would want to not mention specific issues if you're applying for some button-up corporate company that doesn't care or is actually not actively uninterested in LGBT issues. If you're applying at an agency that's really interested in that as their corporate social responsibility, or it's a nonprofit that works with that, you want that not only on your resume but front and center near the top.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So we see a couple examples that I've put here that you saw on the slideshow on page 6. Then I have this link to my blog with 4 quick tips, but I'm just going to tell them to you real quick. Number 1, eliminate vague descriptors. Go through that draft of your resume and just cross off the words helped, assisted with, supported, related to, concerning. People will say assisted with all issues related to children. That doesn't tell me anything, right? So replace those weak descriptors with action verbs, what you actually did. If you assisted with child-related activities, I'd rather you say prepared and cleaned up from snacks for 25 3 to 5-year-olds. And then I really know what you did and really know that you have these skills with that age group and that quantity of kids that age, right? And then, so you've eliminated vague descriptors, replaced the vague descriptors with action verbs. There's infographics all over the internet with action verbs if you can't think of any that are good for resumes. 50 resume action verbs. And then quantify wherever possible. Just go through your resume for every entry. What numbers can I add here that make me look good? Don't add numbers that don't make you look good, right? Quantify wherever possible, okay? And then go back through for vague descriptions that aren't verbs, right? Because sometimes people, they'll say training, right? Volunteered in new TA training, and it's like, what do you mean by training? Okay. So I feel like you all have language on your resume somewhere and in a way that makes you look professional, not just like a student and not just like I have intermediate Spanish, but I have intermediate Spanish and I know how to use it in really good real world ways, right? Okay. So let's go to the page 7, the next thing on here. You've got that resume, you've gone through all of my quick tips, you get to the interview and the interviewer's like, I see here on your resume, you speak Spanish. Cuéntame más de eso en español, por favor. And they just switch to Spanish. Or Russian, or Japanese, or French. You have to be ready not only for that, but for anything else on your resume. I see here, tell me more about that. You have to have a good, polished, prepared answer ready to go for that. What are you going to say? You can't say, sí, hablo español. And you can't ramble on forever about everything you've ever done with language, right? So I want you to take 2 or 3 minutes now and prepare that answer. I say, tell me, cuéntame más de eso, but in Japanese or in Russian. And you have to give me a 30 to 50 second answer in the target language, in Spanish, in Japanese, in Russian. Right here, I'm telling you more about my language. And not just the study of it, but the professional real-world uses of it. I've given you a little outline for doing that, and I'm going to give you 2 minutes now to prepare that answer.
And the 3 languages, these 3 languages here, where no one else speaks, so you might have to actually try English for the purposes of our speaking.
Okay, so we're gonna try these. There's 4 Spanish speakers here. So the 4 of you come up and work in pairs. The other 3 of you will probably have to do it in English because there's no one else here who speaks German, Japanese, or Russian. I apologize for that. So you go to the back. Spanish speakers come up here.
I apologize. I actually have to get to class.
3 Spanish speakers come up here. Who has to be at class at 1? Almost everybody? No? Okay, so let me go over for you guys who are leaving real quick. We're going to speed date this and then refine it and speed date it again. And what you see is the first time through, people are kind of looking at their notes, and by the second time, they're not looking at their notes. And by the 5th time, you have a clear, polished, concise answer. How do you design those answers? That's what you're going to miss. We're going to do 2 frameworks for designing interview answers. For the big, broad questions, we use the elevator pitch, which I lay out. For the little narrow specific questions like your weaknesses, you tell a story and then tell how that story translates for the real world professional context. And we'll give an example. And then we just work on not running out of the interview when it's over, but taking your time, saying you want the job, and leaving a good last impression. Because young people run out of interviews and leave the impression that they don't even want the job. That's where we're going. So those of you who have to go to class, just leave at your leisure. Those of you who have a few more minutes, let's do that speed date so you see what I'm talking about. Just all come up to the front. Oh yeah, you can wheelie up in your chairs.
I guess this is the front.
You can be sitting. Right, because all three of the Spanish speakers are still here. Thank you, Austin. It was great to meet you. Oh, I have cards here. It has my website on there, and I will send you guys those monthly newsletters. The April one is ready. Are you staying, Lauren? Class. Okay, so let's just do it in group 3. Meredith, go.
I'm assuming someone just said, entonces hablo español.
Sí, cuéntame más de eso.
Sí hablo español, pero es probable que usted vaya a entender que tengo un acento más o menos panameño. Y la verdad que yo vivía en Panamá por más de 3 años, entonces yo estaba trabajando en el desarrollo de salud ambiental, o sea, el desarrollo de acueductos o agua potable. También yo enseñaba salud ambiental y en las clases de mujeres y cómo podemos tratar salud de la mujer. Después de eso empecé mi maestría en español en lingüística hispana y yo enseñaba 4 cursos en español en los niveles básicos.
I'm not following that one. That was really good.
That was good. Do you want to go, Sarah, or you have the same problem?
I have about 2 sentences, but yeah.
Okay, a ver, that's it.
Okay. He hablado español por cerca de 10 años. Tuve clases en español en la escuela secundaria hasta tuve 11 años. Actualmente estoy estudiando español para las profesiones en la Universidad de Colorado Boulder. Tomé clases de negocios y también matemática y literatura. And then I was going to talk about studying abroad in Argentina.
So you would want to probably just start with like why you kept studying it after high school,
Okay.
right? So estudié español en el colegio y like whatever, una profesora me inspiró. Or quiero ser doctora y la universidad tiene un programa en español para las profesiones y por eso, right? So follow that thread
Okay.
of connecting it to the real world. You start out talking about your Panama accent. I would get rid of that and go straight to this water stuff, which is like this huge worldwide issue that everybody's concerned about internationally. It's the next big crisis. You've already started working on it in a bilingual and bicultural context, right? And so you hit right on that sanitaria stuff, go straight to women's health, and maybe add more because you have room now if you're not talking about your accent or whatever, right? So you can always polish. Can you do yours again now without looking at the paper?
Estoy estudiando español en un programa de profesiones, estudiando clases de gramática y literatura en la Universidad de Colorado.
That's good stuff. But right, you did it better then, and then you would keep practicing. And this is the other mistake people make. They go in cold, or they just like aren't expecting people to ask them about specific things from their resume. It's only 1 page. You should be ready to give a little spiel about every single specific thing on there. Don't be taken off guard. Be ready, be practiced, be polished, and you have to practice so much that it's internalized and automatic, and you're not reading from the note card in your head, right? And we've seen people do that in every class, language class you've ever been in, when no note cards are allowed, but they might as well have it, right? So you practice and polish for every little thing that's on your resume, including switching to the language. That happens all the time when you're highlighting language. They'll want you to speak that language in music. So how do you craft interview responses? I have the elevator pitch. Anybody in business school? Move forward, David. You're like all isolated from everybody else. Now that's everyone.
Here's the sign-up sheet.
We just all move forward.
So the elevator pitch comes from business school. You have you get in the elevator and the CEO is there with you. You have 30 seconds before those doors open with a captive audience. You have to make your pitch in that time. And the goal is you get to the floor, your destination, the elevator doors open, and that person says, I want to hear more, let's get lunch. Or if it's a venture capitalist, who do I make the check out to? That's what you want to hear. So it's how do you pitch yourself in 30 seconds, right? And so you have to sort of describe the problem or the client's pain, what already exists to address the problem, and your innovative solution or unique contribution. So I said, students intuitively know that studying a language will be a good combination with their professional studies in their professional lives. Universities offer language and culture traditionally, which doesn't jive with that. I train students to highlight their linguistic and culture skills in their job search materials so that they're standout candidates in competitive job markets, right? I explain the motivation, what already exists that isn't enough, and then what I do that's better. And that's how I get gigs like this. I just cold call people and basically pitch. Where you use the elevator pitch are these big, broad questions like you see at the top of page 8. What do you do? Tell me about yourself. Why should we hire you? Right, so they're these big, broad questions and they're trick questions. What do you do is not, I am a teacher, I am a student, I am a doctor. It's, what do? I train language students to highlight their linguistic and culture skills in their job search materials so they're standout candidates in job markets, right? You have this little personal branding statement from your pitch that then gets a conversation going. That isn't just this profession that a million people do and doesn't make you stand out. Tell me about yourself, not your life story. Not I was born in a mountain town in Colorado. It's tell me about yourself confined to the context of this job ad that you've applied to. And why should we hire you? Why is that a trick question? It's not about you. Right. Why should we hire you? And people are like, well, I'm a really motivated self-starter with excellent communication skills, right? The emphasis there needs to be the we. Why should we hire you? And you need to say, your company needs X. Your company's mission is Y. You've researched that company, you know about that company, and you talk about them first. I've done my homework, I know you need X, I have X. Right? So you bring it back to you, but you don't start with you. And this is the problem over and over. People go to the interview and they were like, I want to do this. Why should we hire you? Well, I'm really looking for an opportunity to grow. Well, they're not in the growing business, right? They don't care about your opportunities. They care what you can give them. And this elevator pitch provides a good framework to answer those big, broad questions. The specific questions, like you see on page 9, tell me about a time you worked in a multicultural team. Do you work better in a team or independently? Tell me about a time you failed at something. What are your weaknesses? I was talking to Ray about another one of those questions. Tell me about the time you told the truth and it hurt you. The elevator pitch framework doesn't work so well for that. But the humanities in general and languages in particular provide you with lots of little anecdotes, these stories that seem trivial, but that illustrate really well and prove that you have these skills. So you tell a little story, and I give the example of that with the besitos, with the kisses, right? Air kisses that we've heard of in a lot of cultures. And I tell this sort of funny little self-deprecating story, right? Like, I understood you air kissed their cheeks, but I kept accidentally almost lip kissing people. What was going on? I finally realized you always go right first, but I wasn't sure, so I ran it by my friend. That's a stupid little story if you just tell the stupid little story. But if you tell that cute story that makes them believe you know what you're talking about, you've thought about it, you've reflected on it, you've analyzed yourself, and then you say, this means I am culturally sensitive, I'm self-aware, I recognize when I make a mistake, and I take steps to correct my errors. That's huge that you recognize your own mistakes, because most people don't do that, right? I'm good at perceiving patterns and communicating those patterns to my peers in a collegial way, right? I thought about what was going on, I figured out it went right first, but I had to double check it with a native Spaniard, right? So what's the professional skill there? I'm good at perceiving patterns and communicating that to my peers in a collegial way, right? And then say, in this company, in this industry, in this job, I would use that to find the bugs in your biochemical projections, to provide excellent patient care to whatever you need to be doing in whatever the bulleted requirements are in that job ad. Okay? So it's a lot to convey in one little story as long as you piece it together like that. And I have tons of examples of those stories, and I'm posting more and more before and after YouTube clips where we do this, where someone tells a great story and then I have to turn off the video and say, that's good, but now you've got to explicitly connect it. When people ask, what are your weaknesses? Tell me about a time you failed at something. You always want to give a story. You don't say, oh, my weakness is I procrastinate. Or my weakness is I'm bad at organizing. You say, oh, well, there was this one time where what happened as a result of procrastination without saying the word procrastination. From that I learned, and now I always do it this way, and in this company I will use it to do whatever. Okay? So we're flying through this and not workshopping anymore because we're already past time. The very last thing in the workshop is be ready for an elegant close. The main thing there, and you should use this all the time, in every class, in every job fair, just every day, so you're comfortable, because young candidates are still getting over that sheepish, awkward learning curve, and you'll stand out if you're already comfortable with warm, open body language, a natural smile even though you're really nervous, and you don't want to be like, oh yeah, right before the interview I remembered I'm supposed to smile. Right? You have to be practiced at doing that. Not sitting like this. That's a bad sign, body language-wise. Open body language. Smile. Offer your hand to shake. Medium. You don't want your handshake to be memorable. You don't want a floppy one and you don't want a firm one. Right? Make eye contact. Get people to talk about themselves and be a good listener. Right? So people love to talk about themselves. You listen to what they say. You ask follow-up questions so you seem really interested. Then you're off the hook on talking about you. When they ask you about you, you're ready to go because you've practiced that elevator pitch. You've practiced that little story and what it means, and you don't ramble too much. And then you can get back to getting them to talk about themselves. Okay? So you want to do all of this. Practice all the time. Names. Find out names. Remember names. Use names. That leaves a really good impression on interviewers, and they're not even sure why. They can't even articulate, like, that guy remembered my name and no one else did. So find out names, remember names, use names, warm body language, and be a good listener. Take your time leaving an interview, right? They'll ask you, do you have any questions for us? You want to have a lot of questions before you even show up for the interview, and keep collecting more. There's infographics all over the internet of good questions to ask at that stage in the interview. Make sure you say you want the job without saying, I want this job, but say, I really learned a lot from visiting your marketing team today. They seem to work together really collaboratively. I was able to compare and contrast it to the internship I did last summer, and I really look forward to hearing back from you. That says, I want the job. I've been paying attention. I understand the culture here, and I think I'll fit in, and I can't wait to hear back from you. And then, take your time, leave. Because when you rush out and seem like you don't want the job, you leave a bad last impression, and it is almost or more important than the first impression, right? There's never a second chance to make a good first impression. You leave a bad last impression, that's the last thing those people have in their minds of you, you're probably not getting called. Okay. So practice now. When we leave, we'll shake hands and smile. And I have all kinds of social media, so I'm always blogging about these topics, posting these before and after YouTube interviews. I'm going to send Ray the before and after biochemical engineer resume that was like in paragraph form on 2 pages, and we got it down to 1 page of like normal resume language. I have a Pinterest board, a Facebook page, so you can follow sort of the different tips I'm developing and those kinds of things. Any questions you guys have for me? I have time. If you have time, I feel bad we've run over though.
It's a bit specific, so I don't want to hold everyone. But so I feel like I was a Peace Corps volunteer, and I was able to develop a lot of different skills that don't necessarily, I guess, target every job. But I'm having a hard time putting things on one page to say, I have the skills in engineering or I have the skills in this under Peace Corps, because it was a career for 3.5 years. And how do you say? I have a description of service, which is a 3-page document that was given to me after Peace Corps to say this is what she did and what she got. But who's going to read that?
No one, right. So yeah, you need the clear, tight, concise, bulleted descriptions on your resume. That whole thing of 1 page is an antiquated notion, right? you're doing everything electronically now, so we don't measure things in a page anyway. So if you have 2 lines going off your Word document, you're wasting your time trying to get those 2 lines onto one page, because you'll submit it electronically, or they have those little windows on the application where you're basically cutting and pasting from different parts of your resume. Have you filled out those applications? Where it'll say, list your educational experiences, and you're supposed to list them in the online box.
Right.
So you don't need to worry about fitting it on one page, but you do need to worry about being clear, concise, quantifiable. You know, they say that when it gets to humanized, you have 30 seconds. So you want the best stuff in the top quarter of the page, and you want it accessible to someone who's just glancing. So what are those action verbs you need to pop? What is that quantifiable information that you can write in numeric form, so you don't have to read the whole word? Does that answer your question?
It does. I have to do a lot of working.
Yeah, and this woman with the biochemical engineering, I'll show you. How do we get this back alive? Wiggle this. This before and after resume just went up a few days ago. Oh no, that was an older one. I'm not sure that it's showing up. Oh, it's not showing up on here? I don't have that.
Is it some that's on your? You said this was on one of your social media sites or your general website?
It's on Facebook.com/career coaching languages. It might be on probably on the blog too. Is it coming up yet? On the screen for you to see? Here, it's called Is Your Resume Too Long? Still not coming up. Just this one? Did it last time. So darcylear.com/blog, and I just typed in the search resume, and it comes up with every blog post I've done about resumes. And then this one is your resume too long? Because that's really the issue you're struggling with. And it walks you through the specific example, but also talks about general stuff that you can do. And it's good because it's from the sciences. I'm glad you're a technical so you can make it work. There we go. Thank you. And so here's how long this person's resume was before. Like, look at that, that's a paragraph. And she has the same problem you have. She's like, I did so much there. How can I put it in 1 or 2 lines? Right, you did 3 years of service. Well, I know you got 2 seriously hot lines when you talk about the sanitaria stuff and the women's health stuff. Maybe that's what you need to bring up, or, right?
I guess it would depend on the organization as well.
Right, and you may want some of it under professional experience and some of it under education. But you see that this woman, this candidate, had, look at that one, 5 lines. You should have 2 lines maximum, and that's one of the pointers I give here, right? So get it down to avoid repetition. You know, she'll have scholarships here, and then in the text of the resume telling you about the scholarship again. Here's the after of that, and we see that 5-line thing that she, didn't really want to cut. It's now in 2 lines or 3 lines here. That was this one. She had listed like 4 different universities, and instead she just said Ukrainian universities. If working at one of those universities is particularly important for a certain job you're applying, you edit this to put that Dobrinsky University back in, or whatever. She had another one that was this. She was on the soap research lead, and I walk you through this on the blog post. The word soap was in this entry 5 times, right? And then she had 2 other words in here. She had with dining halls and residence halls. That's too much space to take up on a resume, dining and residence halls. You just got rid of like 5 characters of space, right? And so you'll see on this blog post where I show the before and the after of that soap one and show how we got it. See, here it is, soap, 5 times. And then in the after,
The same exact information is conveyed. Nothing has been lost, but it fits on 2 lines and a recruiter can absorb that. Sometimes you need someone to help you, get a family member, friend, roommate who's not wedded to all that content and all the details.
Okay, great.
So yeah, this is the blog. I'm always adding stuff here, darcylear.com/blog. Okay, this one was an A resume, and I'm like, sorry, you need an A+ resume, and here's how to make it. And then there's an interview. Then I have the Twitter, I don't use as much. Pinterest has a lot of the same things that I blog about, but in that form, where it's just a little. Any other questions for me, or specific things you guys want to work on?
So do you work for yourself or for the university?
I work for myself and sometimes teach adjunct courses at the University of Chicago. And so when I'm at this conference on the campus, the LSD conference, and so on my little name tag, it says the University of Chicago.
So you're not here.
Oh, no. I am in town for a conference. So I do private career coaching and some academic career coaching. Some of my best clients are people trying to finish their dissertation or get their tenure articles published. And then I do campus workshops. And so, for example, I knew I was coming to this conference, so I just blasted everyone with my pitch, all the campuses in the area, and like Metro State, they didn't know me from Adam or Eve, had standing room only in their room. They're so busy on this campus now. You guys are winding down your semester, but I twisted Mark Knowles' arm and got him to invite me here today. And so, like, now this is ending. Next week I go to Northwestern, and then there's no more opportunities to do the workshops because the semester's over. So I'll spend May trying to set stuff up for fall to travel. So this is my 9th workshop in the 6th state just since January. And thank goodness all this snow stopped. I went to Boston. Tufts was closed because of the snowstorm. I had to go home to Chicago and a month later go back to Boston this year.
Oh, quick question. Would you recommend putting conferences you've presented at or like things that you have published if it's not an academic job that you're applying to?
Probably not. I would have a CV with that kind of stuff. Those should be 20 pages long. The more the better on a CV. And then in your professional resume, one of these before and afters that I was just showing you is talking about the student's involvement in a campus organization where she helped organize and presented at several conferences, and that's 1-2 line resume entry, right, of organizing and presenting at a conference. Whereas on your CV, you would want to list each and every conference, the title of your presentation.
Right.
So you can put it there, but you need it to be 2 lines or shorter. On a resume, nothing should be longer than 2 lines per bullet point.
I published 2 manuals in Panama with USAID, but I think it demonstrates that I can write in Spanish, because I was published in it, but
they're practical manuals for low education Panamanians teams.
Yeah.
Those I would put on my resume. I just wouldn't put academic publication on my resume.
Oh, no.
So if you had an article in a journal about
Oh, no, they're actual like.
I would put that on my resume and just the title of the journal. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Or if you know the distribution, if you know how many people that article, that pamphlet has reached, that quantifiable information.
130 something pages.
And there was no written information before you wrote it in Spanish, right? So that's important to highlight, that you created.
I'm a co-author, I should say that. I'm a co-author. There were 4 of us.
Right, with 3 others, created written documents for sanitation or whatever the title.
Tweaking.
And Sarah, I need to send that resume to Ray. Sarah, I want to show you the before and after on the medical school. I'll send that to you.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Mary.